mission, uncompromising commitment to communities, service, leadership, empowerment. Our chapter supports Delta's 5-point programmatic thrusts: economic development, educational development, international awareness and involvement, physical and mental health, and political awareness and involvement. More information about the Jonesboro Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is available at www.jonesboroalumnidst.org or via email jonesboroalumni@live.com.
And now back to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
And we're back on Community Conversations, and we have now joining us in the studio, we have Mr. Richard L. Hartness Sr. He is the author of The Circle, Coping with Integrated Life at Arkansas State University in the Community and at Home, 1970 and through 1978. It is the story of Dr. Calvin and Mrs. Earlene Smith, Dr. Herman and Mrs. Maxine Strickland, Dr. Wilbert and Mrs. Herschel Gaines, which Dr. Gaines is in the studio, Dr. Malsey and Mrs. Vilma Richmond, and we also have the publisher of the book, Dr. George Grant. He is joining us today. So we're going to talk about this story. This story is basically the story of the first black faculty on the campus of Arkansas State University, the struggles that they faced and the challenges that they faced. And so we're going to learn a little bit of black history today. So hope each and every one of you enjoyed. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Good, great.
It's fine, thank you.
All right, so Mr. Hartness, we'll start with you since you are the author of the book. What inspired you to write and to document this story?
Well, it began as a class project in a Arkansas State University class I was enrolled in with the Heritage Studies PhD program. It was called Cultural Resource Methods, and we had to have a project. Well, the class began after I had attended the celebration of life of a friend and a former teacher named Dr. Calvin Smith, and so at the next Martin Luther King celebration, I happened to see Dr. Strickland, and at that time I needed a project, and I remembered him mentioning something about a group he called the Circle. So I asked him about it, and he said he would get in touch with the other members and come back to me and let me know if they were interested in interviews to tell this story. And so that led to several interviews, and then putting those interviews together creates this story of the Circle.
And I have actually purchased my copy and it's come from the Grant House Publishers. And the proceeds of this book will go to the Dr. Calvin Smith Scholarship Fund. So proceeds from this book will help to help others to get their education as well. I have read the book and
history majors.
Yes.
ASU history majors.
And the book is definitely informative. So I want to bring in Dr. Gaines. And Dr. Gaines, what were some of your thoughts when Mr. Hartness approached you about the book, and some of maybe kind of shed some light on some of the stories that you shared with him about life in the Circle?
You know, as when he first approached us, I wondered, why is it that we have a white man who's interested in publishing a book about a group of black persons, and it just reassured me that the Lord uses people. He doesn't see color, he doesn't see creed, he doesn't see religion. He uses those whom he has given a gift to do whatever he wants done for him. And so that's when he contacted me. I was glad to do it, but I never thought it would become the project that it is today. But it is a project that I don't see much as history because I lived through it. But it's really gratifying, and it's encouraging to know that you're part of something that was inspired by God.
All right, and did you have a question, Kabila?
No, I'm listening.
Okay, well, Dr. Gaines, I've read the book, and obviously the book talks about, the challenges and struggles that yourself and other members of the Circle face. So just we don't want to give away too much because we want people to actually buy the book, but I do want you to at least touch upon, what the climate was like. I mean, because we're living in a climate today where there is tension, and of course, there was tension back during that day. So just kind of lightly touch upon, what it was like during that time because you were number 2, right? You were the second black professor. Third.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it was Dr. Smith, Dr. Strickland, and then yourself. So being the third black professor on the campus of Arkansas State University, how did it feel?
Well, when I think about it, I'm reflecting. When I think about it, it all started, the Lord put this in motion for us, I guess, when Arkansas State first became a university. I was a student at Arkansas State University. I was the first black student in the Department of Health and Physical Education to get a master's degree. But that's another story of another time. Ways we were prepared to be a part of this, what some people call a struggle. But there's a struggle in everybody's lifetime, and this happened to have been a challenge that we were prepared to deal with. When I lived in Little Rock, I attended Philander Smith College, and it was during the time of the integration of Little Rock Central High School, and also the integration of Woolworths and a lot of the businesses in Little Rock that would not serve African American people at that time. So I was prepared to deal with that because I had worked with Daisy Bates in the Little Rock NAACP, and we were nonviolent and all that. So I was conditioned for this particular environment, but remember, I'm number 3. I was in a department where we really cared about one another. My chairman was Dr. Jim DeVasia, a good friend to this day. The faculty in my department, we were a faculty of huggers, things that you might call sexual harassment. Now, we were people who greeted one another like that. But the challenges that we faced was living conditions for the most part, because we could not live anywhere in Jonesboro that we wanted to live at the time. We had to live either on Washington Street or somewhere on the north side in Jonesboro, and that was not of our choosing. And of course, Arkansas State made arrangements where we could live on campus. And of course, the Strickland, the Richmonds, and the Smith lived on East College Circle, and I lived on West College Circle, right across the ditch from them. And living on campus like that, I think we paid $75 a month for rent. And,
Wow.
and I came to Arkansas State from Marion, where I had been the head basketball coach and physical education teacher for 12 years. And we had gone through integration at Marion. In fact, when I was first offered a position at Arkansas State University, I had signed my contract to teach in Marion, and the Marion School District would not let me out of my contract because they felt like I was the glue that was helped holding the district together. So I'd gone through the integration process in the Marion School District, and I said to Dean Hodges, who was Dean of the College of Education at the time, if you keep the position open, I would consider coming next year if you would find my wife a job, because it was important to me to keep my family together. Dean Hodges, true to his word, open until the next year. And the next year we came over. He found my wife a job at MacArthur Junior High School, where she taught English. And of course, I taught health and physical education. I never will forget my first contract at ASU was $8,500 a year. And the Marion School District beat that. They offered me $9,000. It's amazing how once somebody else wants you, your value tends to go up. But because of the perks that ASU had to offer, my kids could go to school with minimum amount of money out of pocket expenses, and we chose to come to ASU. And we lived in an area so close together that weekends we became a tight circle. A tight circle. In fact, so much so until we refer to ourselves as the circle. We leaned on one another for emotional and psychological support, and that's where we bonded. And weekends, I never will forget, we just went to one another's house and played cards, and Dr. Smith was my partner. Dr. Richmond and Dr. Strickland were always partners, and we had our little schemes and little signals.
I was about to say, who won the most?
Well, and, you know, I told the story at Dr. Smith's funeral. You know, Dr. Smith, being a historian, he always had some historical type jokes, you know. Whenever he had the trump card in his hand and he knew when we were playing gin rummy, he had Dr. Strickland and Dr. Richmond in a corner. He would pull out the trump card and slap it on his face and say, "Free a slave." But those are the things I remember, Dr. Smith. But we just had a great time on weekends together. My daughters would braid Dr. Strickland's hair, and because we all had long afros, and you know, but that's all in the book. So those were some good times, and the challenges for us. The challenge was mostly because of the conditions. We couldn't live where we wanted to live. In fact, I'll go a little bit further. The first time I decided that I wanted to have my own home, I wanted to move off campus into the city of Jonesboro. There was a realtor that took me to Washington Street and took me to the north side. I said, I'm not interested in that. So he took me out there on Marzian Drive, where I presently live. And the man said to me, I will sell you this house if you buy the lot next door to you. Because he was thinking that if he sold me the house, he would never be able to sell his lot because nobody wants to stay next door to me. My reply to him was, I don't want the house if you don't sell me the lot, because I don't want to live next door to anybody either. But so interesting, I had a good friend who lived next door and told me, he said, you know, we voted to see if we wanted to have a black family move in our community, and that was interesting. But that's the evolution of the times, you know, in which we live. And we have since we moved in, and we've been at that particular spot since 1976, and we had great friends in that community, great people in that community. But those were the challenges that we had to personally face.
Speaking with Mr. Richard Hartness, Dr. Wilbert Gaines, and Dr. George Grant, they are all involved with the Circle, coping with integrated life at Arkansas State University, in the community and at home, 1970 to 1978. If you have a call or a question for either of these gentlemen, the phone number is 870-277-1080. Once again, the phone number is 870-277-1080. We're also live streaming on Facebook. You can post your comments and your questions on our Facebook live stream as well.
Can I share something with you about?
Yes, sir, Mr.
When really, like Dr. Gaines mentioned, the real trailblazer, icebreaker person was Calvin Smith. For 2 years, he and Earlene and their little baby Cece were the black family on the campus. And so all of those really hard experiences were theirs. Whether it was phone calls at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning telling them to go back where you came from, or other more colorful words used in these telephone calls, or realtors that would not sell them houses where they would like to have lived, that sort of thing. Sitting in the instructor's lounge or the faculty lounge at Carl R. Rang Center, and you sat down at a table and no one would come and sit with you. You know, all of that Calvin and Earlene were really the ones that experienced the really bad, the hard racist type stuff that went on. But then when you read the book, you'll see how happy Earlene was when she saw the Stricklands coming back and forth to bring their household goods from Blytheville to Jonesboro. And so she was so happy, to run and tell Calvin that, hey, Calvin, there's a black family moving in just right down, those two folks, the adults, were the ones that really had the real struggle for a couple of years before Dr. Strickland and Dr. Gaines came on the scene.
I just want to say, as a former student of ASU and hopefully returning to ASU to finish, some degrees, I'm very honored to be sitting here with you all today. We don't know, a lot of students don't know the history and don't know where the professors come from and what they've gone through, and I'm very humbled and honored. So thank you for continuing on and not giving up and pressing forward and, being the professor and doctor you are. Thank you. And thank you so much, Mr. Richard, for writing the stories. I pray that everyone gets this book. I'm going to be purchasing the book soon. It should be a household read. Former students, present students, maybe it should be turned into a class.
Hey. And with that, I want to bring in Dr. Grant. Dr. Grant, we haven't talked about his background, but Dr. Grant was the longtime head librarian of the Dean B. Ellis Library, and he is also a publisher through his company, Grant House Publishers, who published the book. Dr. Grant, I'm sure this was probably something that was very near and dear, unique to your heart. You have published over 160 books, because you say it all the time at the Black Business Association meetings.
Yes.
But how did it feel to work on this book compared to other projects that you've done during your career?
Well, my professional career in library science in the library was over 50 years. So I'm very familiar with books, and getting involved in publishing, I had insights into what was a good story, what needs to be done. And I suppose the contribution that I might make to this conversation this morning is that I shouldn't have been talking earlier, because the author and the subject are really critical to this conversation. But I want to emphasize that when I read the story, I knew this story had to be written. It's historically significant. It's the kind of information that too often we try to research 50 years later after the people are gone, and you can never get the authentic facts and information that you get from the interview that he conducted. So what I encourage is just people should start writing their stories. They should start telling their stories. Everybody's got a story, and everybody's got a piece of our history in them. So just this book and several other books that I published in the last month that did a 92-year-old lady in Memphis who told her story. I would encourage people to start writing their stories down, getting interviews, and to find people. We need authors who will interview and write, and then we need subjects who will, in fact, share their stories. And if that's the message that I would have today, that this is an excellent book historically. Thank God interviews were conducted while some of the people were still alive, rather than trying to research it 50 years from now.
And I would absolutely agree with that. And, I have a connection to just about every subject in the book. Dr. Smith, I had African American history with. Dr. Strickland was my undergraduate advisor in college. Dr. Gaines recently was on the board of directors of the Voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council that owns KLEK. He recently retired from that position, and I want to just say on there, thank you for all that you did for KLEK. Dr. Grant, I'm involved in the Black Business Association with. I didn't know Dr. Richmond that well, but with him being in a position of authority on campus at the time, obviously it was his job to ensure that students such as myself were being taken care of while on campus. So, I myself, feel a personal connection to each member of the circle.
Dr. Richmond and his wife Velma and I were all in undergraduate school at Philander Smith College in Little Rock, Arkansas. So we have a background together. We were all great friends at Philander Smith, and it's amazing how we came full circle and ended up at Arkansas State University at the same time. But I would just add one thing too. I think that my reason for coming to Arkansas State was probably different than the others. The Lord had something else in mind for me because I have a sports background, and I wanted to coach when I left Marion, but there was no coaching positions. So I went into officiating.
All right, well, Dr. Gantz, we're going to have to get ready to go into break, but when we come back from the other side of the break, I want you to continue that story. You listen to Community Conversations, and this is KLEK 102.5 FM.
You're listening to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. We'll be right back.
We're back with Money Matters. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. Constantly running out of money before you run out of month is a sign that you need to get your spending under control. If you have a budget but can't seem to stick to it, you could be buying into lies, also called marketing messages, which cause you to overspend. Here are a couple of them with reality checks to help you change your spending habits. Save money by spending with us. The lie here is that it's possible to spend your way to savings as long as you shop at the right places. How about buy one, get one free? If you have to buy something to get something else, the second thing is no more free than the first one was. Think I'm just being technical? Try turning down the first one and asking for the second so-called free one and see what happens. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. for Money Matters, a product of American Urban Radio Networks.
Money Matters is made possible by the Jonesboro Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, a nonprofit organization dedicated to uncompromising commitment to communities, service, leadership, empowerment. www.jonesboroalumnidst.org.
From the KLEK Community Calendar, the North Point Church of Christ will be serving Thanksgiving meals at the church, 500 Pepper Drive in Jonesboro on November 19th, 2016 from 11 o'clock a.m. until 2 o'clock p.m. The public is invited.
And now back to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
And we're back on Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. We are speaking with Mr. Richard L. Hartness Sr., author of the book, The Circle, talking about the life of the first African-American faculty on the campus of Arkansas State University. We're also joined by Dr. Wilbert Gaines, who was the third African-American faculty member on the campus of Arkansas State, and we also have the publisher, Dr. George Grant. Before we went to break, we were speaking with Dr. Gaines. He was kind of relaying a story about his athletic background and how it tied into this. So we had to kind of cut him off, so we wanted to let him go ahead and finish what he was talking about.
Well, I think my athletic background suggested that I go a different route. And also in my department at the time, we had theory and practice of coaching for men, theory and practice of coaching track and field for men, theory and practice of coaching basketball for men. Well, I came out of Marion High School where we had just integrated. And I was coaching girls, I was coaching boys basketball. There's no such thing as a boy basketball and a girl basketball. You teach basketball skills. So we ended up with courses that theory and practice of coaching basketball and no gender attached to it. And the other thing is, when I came to Arkansas State University, I think officiating in Northeast Arkansas was a challenge because we had not had any black officials to officiate in Manila and Marmaduke and Rector and Greene County Tech. And so I went into, Dr. John Hozinski took me to Manila to officiate with him. And of course, a man was following me around in the gym with a camera, and the next day in the newspaper, the first black official to ever officiate in Buffalo Island. And I thought that was interesting. I have a picture of that right now for documentation. But all of these schools in Northeast Arkansas that had not seen a black official, I went into those schools and officiating, and many of the coaches who had gone through our coaching program at Arkansas State said to me, "You can come back anytime you want to and bring anybody you want to bring with you." So what did I do? I went back and I took some women officials with me. So it just opened up the doors and opportunities for people to have open minds about people with gifts, with nothing attached to it but their ability to give back from the gift that they have been blessed with.
That is wonderful. So at some point, did some of the people that you taught, did they eventually branch out and start applying for positions at those schools that at first didn't have any blacks?
Oh, yes. These schools, let's take for example, at Martree High School right now, Barbara Wilbert is the only woman boys basketball coach in the state of Arkansas. She coaches the boys basketball team. She has won a state championship. So you see, it's them coaches who are in the Hall of Fame who has never won a state championship, and she went out her second year. And there are so many young men. I think Chip Lane at Bay High School, he's a superintendent now.
Okay.
Galen Taylor, who's over BIC right now. They're superintendents of school. They went through our coaching program at Arkansas State University, and they coached, and I refereed their games, and I called a technical foul on them, and they fussed back at me, and that's just part of it. And that's what I think when I reflect, it was not something I did. It was something that the Lord put me in place to do, and they accepted me, and of course we're all better off as a result of it.
Okay. So how active are you still? Are you still teaching at ASU?
No, I retired.
All the circle members are retired.
So are you still active? Do they still call upon you to come and participate in any courses or just come talk to the students that are going through those programs?
My wife and I are on Arkansas State University campus every morning.
Okay.
Doing our workout. We work out every morning, except I'm here today.
Okay.
But we have gone to classes up there and explained exercises for aging, because even when I was teaching, I designed exercise program for athletic officials.
Wow.
I helped Debbie Turner design an exercise program to help her pass swimsuit wear when she became Miss America. And this is all documented. You can go back and find it. But to me, it's been a pleasant journey. It's been a pleasant journey. And I wouldn't substitute it for anything in the world. I've had great people to do great things for me, and I know that when the Lord gives you a vision, He makes provisions for it to become a reality. And now when I go out on campus, I'm accepted and I'm appreciated, and life goes on.
You, I'm sure, without a doubt, you've definitely touched a lot of people, and they are better for it, for having come in contact with you and all of the other professors, the doctors that are listed in the book. I also have taken Dr. Smith's class. I was a freshman and I was ambitious and okay, that class kind of brought me back down to earth. But I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed Dr. Smith as a professor.
As did I.
I wish I had waited till I was a sophomore to take his class, but oh well.
Oh, Dr. Grant wanted to come in with a comment.
To put this book in perspective, and this is what fascinated me about it, was that this was not a unique set of circumstances across the country. black people were integrating the faculty at institutions, all white institutions, predominantly white institutions all over the country. And what really caught my attention was this was a first accurate chronicle of it.
Okay.
I published another book called Nerve Juice about the University of Minnesota, and a history professor, Horace Huntley, out of Birmingham. He's in Birmingham now, but he wrote about his experiences as a student demanding black faculty at the University of Minnesota. And there are other institutions that simply have not, the story hadn't been written. I personally was a part of 3 people who integrated University of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. We just didn't have the benefit of being close and creating this atmosphere of the circle.
Okay.
But this was significant because this is an excellent example of what went on at higher education institutions during that period. But it's not the only one. It's just an excellent example for people, and hopefully it'll spark other people to share their stories about their experiences too.
I really do hope so. Yes.
We got go ahead, Kobe.
No,
So we got some Facebook shout outs. Nora Hunt says good conversation and information, and we got shout out also to Michelle L. Gaines.
Okay. So, who is she? Is that your daughter?
That's my daughter.
Okay.
Michelle, when I was inducted into the Arkansas Hall of Fame for officials, Michelle couldn't be there that night. She was one of the women officials that I took with me every night to officiate, and she would have been great at officiating. And I've shared with her, she would be working in the NBA now had she chosen to stay with officiating.
Okay.
When she moved to Florida, she was a health and physical education teacher in Orange County in Orlando. Okay. Well, Orange County shut down the health and PE, so she was without a position. Well, I said, come home. You can always come home. She came home. I had cataract surgery. My wife had hip surgery. And she was here taking us going places. And as soon as we were well, she had a call from the State Department in Tallahassee, Florida, to come and take a position in the health department in Tallahassee. And that's where she is now. Her office is, you can look over the Florida State University and FAMU's campus from her office window. So the Lord has just really, really, really blessed us for stepping up to whatever challenge He had for us, and it's just things just coming in full circle, and I'm just so excited about this book because this story is more than just a book about some faculty members.
I see Dr. Hartness has a comment, but we're getting ready to go up against the top of the hour. We got to do station identification. So when we come back from the top of the hour, we will get some comments from Mr. Richard Hartness, who's actually working on his doctorate. This is part of his doctoral thesis, so we'll be soon calling him Dr. Richard Hartness. You're tuned to Community Conversations. This is KLEK 102.5 FM.
KLEK-LP, Jonesboro, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council.
Good Thursday morning, Jonesboro. This is meteorologist Tim Root with your KLEK 102.5 forecast. Mostly sunny skies with temperatures in the mid-60s today. Southwest wind 5 to 10. Mostly clear, 42 to 48 overnight. Near 70 with sunshine on Friday, Veterans Day, and light winds expected. For the weekend, mostly sunny to partly sunny Saturday and Sunday. Temperatures over the weekend, upper 50s to mid-60s. Educating, entertaining, and empowering Jonesboro, we're KLEK 102.5 FM.
From Feature Story News in London, I'm Ollie Barrett. US President Barack Obama is welcoming President-elect Donald Trump to the White House for discussions on the transition of administrations. A senior Chinese official has been elected head of the Global Police Cooperation Agency, Interpol, for the first time. And a long-awaited reception centre for migrants has opened in northern Paris, close to the site where almost 4,000 people were camping on the street a week earlier.
It's 10 o'clock.
KLEK LP Jonesboro, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council. It's now time for Community Conversations, a program focusing on the people working to make the Jonesboro community a better place while offering viewpoints from all sides of the issues. The views expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of KLEK 102.5 FM, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, or our underwriters or sponsors.
And we're back on Community Conversations, a special extended edition of Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. We are speaking with Mr. Richard L. Hartness, Sr., author of The Circle, Coping with Integrated Life at Arkansas State University, in the Community and at Home, 1970 to 1978, where it chronicles the story of Dr. Calvin and Erlene Smith, Dr. Herman and Maxine Strickland, Dr. Wilbert and Herschel Gaines, and Dr. Mossy and Velma Richmond. We also have Dr. Wilbert Gaines in the studio and the publisher, Dr. George Grant, in the studio with us. And before we went to station identification, Mr. Hartness had some things that he would like to say.
All right. When I was doing the interviews, I got word from a couple of the Circle adults, children, saying, well, why don't you interview us? We're part of the Circle too. And so as a result of that, when we were creating the book, another Gaines daughter, Janae, was asked to come up with like a consensus or a word from the children. So there is a chapter in the book which I will say, not going to go into, but it's a very touching story from the standpoint of one of the children of the Circle. And so I had said something about the next generation, but Janae authored chapter 12, Growing Up in the Circle.
Oh, wow.
So another addition to the book. And another thing I wanted to mention was when we get together and talk about different positions in the Circle, I'm struck by Dr. Strickland. Herman will say when you talk about trailblazers or icebreakers, but he presents himself, he says he was a pioneer because from his standpoint, in the world of high school education, with a master's degree, they're on track. Everything's fine, and that's kind of the high point. But then when you transition to a college campus, then it's a different ball game with the tenure track and all the other things that you have to do. And three of these men came with one of the conditions being that they would work on a doctorate while they were there. And it's significant to me that out of the 8 adults, men and women, there were 22 earned degrees among these 8 individuals. So not only did the men continue on with their education, but their wives in the Jonesboro School District continued on, in their world.
I would like to say, I think this story shed some light on how if you persevere, you don't give up, you just press forward no matter what the challenges are. Look what your life can become. These professors are very well respected within the community. They're very well known within the community. But what if they had given up from the beginning? What if they had said, this is too hard, I can't do this? But they chose to keep going. They chose to push through. And look where they are now. And I just thank them for it. And I thank God for them.
Yeah, it was,
and I'm sure their children are better for it as well. I would love to see another edition, from the children's perspective, what it was like growing up, like a full book from the children's perspective.
Dr. Mossy Richmond, when he came there, he was an instructor for a very short time because he got into the administrative side, and really it was on a meteoric rise. I think he even served as an interim president of Arkansas State for a short time before he passed away. And so, that loss was Arkansas State's loss as well as our community. But selfishly, I'll have to add, Mossy Richmond was from my hometown, Wynne, Arkansas.
Shout out to the Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he and Ms. Richmond were teachers in the Wynne school system, having transitioned over from the Childress high school days, when it was segregated.
Okay.
And then when they integrated, then those two individuals taught in my alma mater, in Wynne High School. Go Yellow Jackets. That's right.
All right.
Yeah, let me just interject here that the book warrants merits having a children's book prepared for it. I'm not a children's book publisher, but there's something about we made some decisions. One is that the book be small enough and consumable so that people would not be intimidated by it. You can publish a book that's 300 pages and people simply won't pick it up. Mm-hmm. But this is a book that's attractive and readable and consumable. Second thing is that we made point to put in an index, which is scholarly publications have to have an index. Okay. We also did some things like putting a chapter in here says off campus, but it's a chronology of what was happening on campus around the time that this happened. It's outside the circle but on campus. Okay. And it's a chronology of what other moves were being made here at the university as a result of their being here. Because they sparked integration and they sparked people. See, one of the things about this is that we don't talk about the fact that because they were here, other people came. Okay, so they were pioneers. And so this book probably has several versions that should be written. At some point it could be expanded for scholarly purposes. Okay. And at some point a children's book might be written about this so that other young people will understand historically what happened at this campus. So when you talk about the possibilities for the book, there's still more.
Okay. And adding on to that, there was a chapter in the book that dealt with how the black fraternities and sororities came on Arkansas State, and I know that's something that probably could be a separate book as well. I mean, it's briefly touched upon, but especially for the Greeks that are currently on campus, I think that would definitely be something of interest to get the full story of how each of these fraternities and sororities were chartered on the campus of Arkansas State University.
You're absolutely right. In fact, Dr. Strickland would be connected, who's Alpha, and of course Dr. Smith was Omega, and of course a little later Dr. Mason came on, and he's with the Signals, and I was with the O Noble Kappa Alpha Psi in 1975. So you're right there. There is a connection among the Greeks and all of us.
There's a possibility of some master's theses and PhD theses on that alone, and it should be done while people are still alive to tell the story rather than somebody recording it, researching it.
So, Mr. Hartness, you might need to tell your classmates to get on it.
Well, and another thing too, a point to be made. Now that this book has been published, the transcripts of the interviews are now available at the ASU archives, where other people can now use that. As long as I was working on it, there was agreement signed that nobody else could use it. Okay. But now that this book is published, then now other people can go to the transcripts of those interviews and use them in their research.
Could I do a PSA?
Sure.
There's a book signing in Dean B. Ellis Library at 3:30 this afternoon on the main floor, and we're going to have some more discussions with members of the circle and with the author Richard Hartness.
And while you're speaking on that, Dr. Grant, let's again want to stress that about how the proceeds of this book are going to benefit history majors in the future. So let's talk about and that's tied into the legacy of Dr. Smith and how this is going to help with his legacy and to give back as well.
Well, when we were discussing the book, books have to be funded. Okay, if the money doesn't just show up, regardless of how much merit there is in publication. So we approached the ASU Foundation, who manages the Dr. Smith Endowed Scholarship Fund, and they were willing to advance us the money to get the first run of the book. We published 200 copies, paperback. We just didn't know how well the book. I was optimistic, but you just can't gamble in these days. So they funded, they advanced the money for publishing the first round, and we are reimbursing them from the proceeds, from the sales. But at the same time, I have to give credit to, I said I didn't want to make a profit off of it, and lo and behold, the author said, well, I don't want to make a profit off of it either. So his royalties, which would normally go to an author, is going to the scholarship fund, and my profit is going to the scholarship fund. And we weren't sure what the impact would be. We didn't know whether people would be that interested in reading, but we are doing a second run next week, and we're also producing a hard copy. This is paperback copy. We're producing a hard copy. The price is going to be $15 for the paperback and $20 for the hard copy. Well worth it.
Well, I've already bought the paperback, so I'll be getting the hard copy, so I'll be going around to.
Well, no trade-in, but you could buy.
No, I'll keep it.
I know, but no, I just want to say no trade-ins. But you will. The hard copy is appreciated. We hope to have this in all of the libraries, and the public libraries, and academic libraries, and school libraries all over the state, because the story has been well received, and it's the one that's just it had to be told.
Yeah, tell your Facebook friends.
All right, Christmas is around the corner, so
There
here you go.
Christmas gift. It makes an excellent Christmas gift. Okay.
Well, I was on campus at Philander Smith College this weekend for homecoming, and since on page 85, 3 of the families got their undergraduate degrees from Philander Smith College. Dr. Richmond, Mrs. Richmond, and of course myself. And they are excited to have this publication in their library. And so it's I think every library in Arkansas, especially Northeast Arkansas, would probably be interested in having a copy in their library.
And have another Facebook shout out to Dr. Gaines from Yvonne Marie Taylor.
Thank you.
And of course, if you want to leave a comment, or if you got a question, or just want to know more, the phone number is 870-277-1080. Once again, that phone number is 870-277-1080. Sequel Beela's reading the book as we speak.
It's like a lot of these things happened before I was even born, so it's like the trail was already blazed and set afire, and ready for my generation to start, doing something. I just really hope that more younger people, younger than myself, gets their hands on this book, read it, and let it spark something within them to do more, be more, and make more accomplishments and leave their mark on this world as well. There's always work. There's always something for someone to do. The work is never done. So, sorry.
And again, the proceeds does go to the endowed scholarship for Dr. Calvin Smith for history major. So again, if you are thinking about going to college at Arkansas State and majoring in history, this is a scholarship in which you could get that could help pay for your education, so that you could be a scholar of tomorrow and tell the story of somebody else that is blazing a trail, because people are still blazing trails to this day.
Mm-hmm. My wife at MacArthur Junior High School, and it's interesting how many professionals in this community right now will see us out for dinner and tell the waitress, I've picked up that tab for them. Don't tell them I told you. And she's now has been with the Spelling Bee, Craighead County Spelling Bee for years, and they refer to her as the Spelling Bee lady. And she was assistant principal at Jonesboro High School for 15 years. So this us coming to Jonesboro meant more than Arkansas State University. It meant the community, it meant Northeast Arkansas, and it just meant just make this a better place for everybody. We want to leave this place better than we found it. That's
Yes,
what
sir.
I think the challenge of all of us must be.
Yes, sir.
And there's also, they touched on it, 3 of those gentlemen were also deacons at First Baptist Church, Kitchen Street, and I'm sure the ladies probably had some input into some of what goes on there in that church family. So, the Lord has really been a blessing all the way around.
Yes, sir. And that church has a lot of history itself as well. So
That could be another book in itself as well.
Let me relate that even personally. I was back in 2002. I was attempting to help Glenn Jones, Dr. Jones, who was diversity, affirmative action. I had no. And we actually referred a half dozen people to him that I thought could make excellent direct deans of the library here. But they weren't interested in coming to Arkansas. Unfortunately, they just didn't want to come to Arkansas. I thought it was an excellent job, and I really encouraged them. And so I decided, because of my father's health in Memphis, ill health, his mentioned health, I decided I'd come to Memphis to help my sister with care of my father. And so I told him, well, look, I'm retired in Florida here, and I've helped you as much as I can, but I got to go to Memphis now and help my father. And he said, why don't you come over and talk to us? And of course, I was retired. I didn't have any idea I wanted to do it, but I just took. He really encouraged me to come. I came for an interview, and probably the thing that helped me make a decision was that after the interview, we went over to Dr. Strickland's home for an interview, and I met most of these guys, and I said, wow, they need somebody here. I'll come and try this, just because I saw the support system that was in place. So that's 40 years later, 30 years later anyway, and it still made an impact. That's how I really decided to come here.
And when we're talking about impacts, let's bring back Mr. Hartness. How have you personally been impacted just from telling the story? Because you got to know these men and ladies and even the children very intimately by meeting with them, having the interviews, putting all the information together and compiling it. So, after the dust is settled, what are some of your personal thoughts?
He's a brother now.
Amen.
Did they make you an honorary member?
Here's the short version. At that same Strickland home, and I go over there one time to meet with them, and some family were there, and they had just gotten to the end of finishing breakfast, and so there was still a little food around, and so all of a sudden I hear from Maxine and Herman, you want some breakfast? So, well, I'm always good for food, so I said, well, here's eggs and bacon, and well, I can't turn food down, so and so when I'm presented with this plate full of breakfast food, Dr. Strickland says, and that's the way it was during the times of the circle. Whenever we get together, you break out the food and enjoy the food and the fellowship, and so at the First Baptist Kitchen Street books talk that we had with part of the that's and well, besides that, we are anyway, because all of us are brothers and sisters in Christ anyway. So based on our relationship with the Father who really counts, we're all family.
And I like to inject that I have complimented him on his treatment of the subject. Everybody couldn't write this story the way he wrote it. And I did have some questions when I initially looked at it. I said, now, how is he going to treat this subject? And I think he treated it as fairly and wrote it as well as anybody could have written it.
When you publish something like this, and I know there's some, they'll say the unauthorized version or something like that. It's always been my goal on the final drafts or on the draft right before publication, each one of these folks got to read it
again.
Because there are some things in the interviews, there are some things in the unrecorded parts of where we fellowship together. It's not in the book.
Okay.
There's some personal relationships that these folks don't want to be destroyed or made to look bad. So each person was given the opportunity to look through it before it was published. So what you read is what they approve.
At the end of the day, we think we were in control. We were not in control. Decisions were made for us, and we just stepped in and carried out those assignments that was already in place for us.
All right, we got about 60 seconds left. Let people know where they can get their copy of The Circle. It goes to a good cause. It goes to the Dr. C. Calvin Smith Scholarship Fund for History Majors. So let people know where they can get their copy of The Circle.
Well, if you send a check to ASU Foundation, that's one of for $15 plus $3 for shipping and handling, or $20 and $4 for shipping and handling. You can send a check to ASU Foundation for that, or you can call me at 901-218-3135, or if you know the Gaines or anybody, just call some of us and we'll get the book to you. We expect to have it in the bookstore shortly, but we're going to do a first round of so that we don't have to give the bookstore. The bookstore, in fact, on campus is going to sell the book without the commission.
Okay.
Okay, and we have so we're going to get copies of both the paperback and the hardcover in the bookstore shortly.
All right, we got about 50 seconds, so I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. Go get your copy of The Circle. It goes toward a good cause, and you learn a lot about local history here in Jonesboro and at Arkansas State. Be blessed. Have a great day. This is KLEK 102.5 FM.